about is, am I doing enough, or um, am I doing I'm glad you remembered. Am I doing the right things? Or so for me, there was a big, and maybe it's not something that you worry about, but there was a big study that was done that was called the Life Project, and it was done in Britain. Actually, it wasn't directly done with JIA or in autoimmune context at all. But it looked at what is one of the biggest predictors. So they followed, it was a very, very long-term study. I might lie to you if I tell you how many years they followed people, but they followed them for decades, essentially, from childhood into adulthood, into, established adulthood, later in life. And they looked at what was the biggest predictor of success. And they found that the biggest predictor of success was actually parenting, which can feel like, when I said like that, it can feel like, oh, that's such a stress. But it goes on to say that the things that was the most impactful in parenting was talking to and listening to your child, making it clear that you have ambitions for their future, or believe in their future, or believe that there's a future for them, being emotionally warm, teaching them letters and numbers, taking them on excursions. And remember, this doesn't have to be like, it's like taking them to the park or taking them to the library, but just exposing them to things outside of their home, reading to them daily and encouraging them to read, and having a regular bedtime. Those are the biggest predictors for success in life, which I feel like you're not necessarily going to get all of them right all the time. And some of them might look different at different times. But for me, it was quite helpful. Like when I remind myself that actually they're going to be okay if I'm doing some of these things to various degrees at different times. We've got this. It's actually okay. And often it is, as I say, for me personally, it's coming back to the basics and realizing I don't always have to be able to fix everything as much as what I want to, because it's not ever having challenges, or not ever having difficulties, or not having bad days. It is how we work through it that actually ends up determining our big picture. And I think I almost want to say why, for me, it was such a reassuring list in a lot of ways, but also just such a reassurance again that it's the little things that we do that add up. It's not the big things. And I almost want to say that what I would hope to be a key takeaway from tonight is it's the little things. It's the cumulative effect of the little things. And that means both in the cumulative effect of all the little stresses that build up that don't seem like a big thing, but that just really can overwhelm us. But it's also the cumulative effect of the small things that we do, little things that we do to cope, and the little moments we find. And those are the things that make a big difference as well. All right. So I also mention on my slides, you'll see them, I say, we all get it wrong a lot. It's not about the every moment, and don't worry about that one mistake that you made or the 10 mistakes you made that day. It's about the big picture. It's not a single event. And that's a wonderful thing about how the brain works as well, is the brain often can't literally tell time, in the sense that if you have memories, your experience of it, your brain kind of amalgamates it all into one, and you can't necessarily differentiate how far away it was, or how many events were singular events versus, all-encompassing events. I'm sure we all have specific days that are very ingrained, like our wedding day, possibly, or the day of our children being born. But a lot of our other memories, and especially our childhood memories, are kind of, they're interlinked into those favorite family holidays or family meals, or there's not always a specific one. So it is, again, it's that cumulative, there's going to be different events and different seasons. So the two, as I mentioned this last time for those who attended, is that the two kind of, my brain thinks in mind maps. So the two kind of aspects that I'm talking about tonight, and the one is energy accounting, and the one is tools. So energy accounting is referred to, but some people will call it string theory, and some people talk about their battery and their capacity, and some people talk about energy accounting. The terminology is not necessarily important. The concept is quite basic. It's a really, really straightforward, easy concept. the application is really difficult. And this is true for most individuals. It's really difficult to actually apply the energy accounting or battery management or whichever term you're going to use. I'm going to refer to it as energy accounting, but you can use whatever is comfortable for you. And why do I say it's so difficult for most people? And this is not even specifically even again a context of JIA, but in general, one of the things that we see a lot of is very high rates of burnout, very high rates of anxiety, very high rates of depression across the lifespan, across cultures, across the world. And one of the biggest contributing factors to that is that we don't actually know how to manage our capacity. So, energy accounting refers to we all have a energy bank of resources, and that's physical resources, emotional resources, cognitive, which is your thinking processes, resources, spiritual resources. We all have a resource bank with this within it. And this is not a never-ending resource that's just available and you can just keep withdrawing and withdrawing and withdrawing. We have a limited capacity. This is your resources, and that's what you can draw from. And every day we do things that is either a withdrawal from that energy resource or it's a deposit. And different things can be. So for me, example, reading a book would be a deposit for myself. Standing in a line in the shopping center, that would be a withdrawal. So that would be quite an easy one to kind of go, okay, withdraw or deposit. But possibly going for coffee with a friend, that might be for some people, it could be a deposit and a withdrawal, because the deposit is spending time with someone that you really enjoy, but the withdrawal could be trying to be okay when I'm really struggling at home because my child is having a flare and I don't want to be talking about it all the time, but at the same time I'm really feeling overwhelmed and I'm worrying about maintaining my friendship as well as worrying my child and leaving my child, feeling guilty about that, but also I really need this time with friends to recharge. So then it becomes a little bit more complicated. Is this a deposit or withdrawal? And the amounts that a deposit or withdrawal would be is also going to be unique to each family member. So in the context of JIA, then, one of the things that would be a withdrawal for parents is a lot of the kind of I spoke about at the end of the last session is a lot of the mental load that goes with it, which is things like, is the fact that she's now emotional, is it because she is starting to flare, or is it because she's just had a difficult day? Is the pain that she's talking about, is it because it's JIA related, or is it because she hurt herself in sport? Is the medication working? What do I need to say to the doctor? When's the next appointment? What professional should I see? So there's this mental load that goes with it, which is I talk about debit orders. It's these debit orders that go off. And it is a very difficult thing because a lot of those thought processes are not necessarily adding value to your coping or your child's coping, but it is being a withdrawal. But it's very, very difficult not to manage them, or not to almost want to say to feel like you can let go of them, because it can feel like if I don't think about those things, then I might miss something, or I might not help my child, or and often again, that's where I spoke about in session one. Those can often be trauma responses as well, as our fear of our child struggling again, our fear of that uncertainty of whether or not they're going to be okay, can then cause a lot of these thoughts that become withdrawals as well. For our kids with JIA, for when they have pain, the trying to manage and tolerate and kind of push through and function when they have pain can be a big withdrawal. So something that they could do, it's not just the actual pain, but it's the emotional impact of being in pain. It's the emotional impact of loss of enjoyment because you don't get the same amount of enjoyment because you're in pain, or so the amount of withdrawals is more because of the actual physical symptoms. The amount of deposits is less because the symptoms are now making it more difficult. Or it might mean that they don't go to school, they can't do an activity with their friend, or they miss out on their favorite sport. So the things that would have been deposits for them are potentially not there, and it becomes a double whammy almost in terms of the withdrawal and the deposit. So the Christine Miserando talks about the spoon theory, which is very similar in the concept of she describes it as, I think she was diagnosed with, is it lupus? I might be wrong, but so she also has an autoimmune condition herself, and she describes it as she starts her day with a certain amount of spoons, and everything she does takes a spoon from her. There are some healthy habits like getting enough sleep or eating healthily or being on the right medication that can give you some additional spoons, but there's only so many spoons to go around. And when the spoons are done, they're done. There's nothing you can do. There are no more spoons left over. So with the bank, the resource bank analogy, it's the same as if I go to my bank account and I keep drawing money and drawing money. Eventually, the bank is going to say, you don't have any more money left. Then you have the option of getting a loan, but you're going to have to pay interest on that. So things that now withdrawals that would normally have been 10 Rand or 10 in energy resource or however becomes 15 Rand because now I'm paying interest on it. So it actually becomes more difficult because now that thing that you need to do, that amount of energy it's taking from you actually increases. So what happens at that point is that you see a lot more fatigue. Usually you see the person feels more irritable or more emotional or more shut down. They start to go into a early burnout kind of aspect. And it's because they don't actually have the resources to be doing the things that they need to do every day. And as I say, sometimes it's really difficult because there are very real withdrawals that you're not in control of. But that's where, what do we do practically is we need to become aware of what are our daily withdrawals and what are deposits for us. And that's where I say it is something that is very much a societal problem that we have, is that a lot of people don't actually realize, or they're not very aware or cognizant of what are the things that are withdrawals and what are the things that are deposit for me, because my withdrawals and deposits are not going to be the same as yours, because we all have different things that we find that recharges us physically or spiritually or emotionally, and different things that really take from us. And I mean, I think certain things like pain will probably be a withdrawal for everybody, but the amount of withdrawal is not necessarily going to be the same for everyone. So one of the things that I often, and this is in various contexts, but what I would say from a very practical point is to actually sit down as a family, and for parents might want to do it themselves first and then do it with kids, but you really want to do this as a family. Choose a language that works for you. So whether it's talking about, so a lot of our kids, they relate to the concept of a cell phone battery. And tonight I'm giving you very real life experience of this. Is the lower the battery comes, you get to a point, you can maybe get a little bit of an energy bank, but when that's done and the battery's done, there's nothing you can do. It's gone, it's gone. So what you can use the battery analogy, you can use a bank account analogy, you can use a spoon theory, whatever. If maybe there's I've sometimes used Lego blocks with kids and kind of built the Lego and gone, okay, when the blocks are done, they're done. So for some kids that works. You use what works for your family, but use a language that can make sense, and then have a family discussions around what are the things that gives us more, what charges our battery, and what are the things that take from our battery. So for some people, it could be that that having predictability and routine actually helps them to feel more that like their battery is more recharged. And when things suddenly change, that's a big withdrawal. And they often get married to the people who are the complete opposite. So finding those things and finding those balances can make a big difference. And just, as I say, having a family discussion around that, and then also writing it down over a course of a week. And it does take effort doing that, but it can really be life-changing if you have, and it doesn't have to be like to the detail, absolutely perfect, but just having an idea over this week, what was my withdrawals, what was my deposit? Because if you do it visually and you do it with the whole family, everybody doing it, it's so much more in your face, so much more clear on where your balance actually is. And it also gives a really nice language to use within the family for things like if one of the siblings is struggling, to be able to see this is what their withdrawals is and this is their deposits. It's not personal, it's not favorism, it's got to do with where their capacity is. And as a family, we care about each other and we want to help each other. So it shifts that focus into a different, more neutral thing that everybody almost has access to. It's also like, for example, if for me and my husband, actually, for that matter, we both sometimes really need time just on our own. And I think everybody needs that. But if I'm feeling I've had a long day at work, it's been quite stressful, I've had a lot of very intense appointments, I might need a little bit of time where I'm on my own, where I can just transition from all of that at work to home. So in an ideal world, it would mean I don't necessarily come out of my office. I work from home until I'm able to make the transition. But sometimes my kids know what time I'm finishing, or I really need bathroom, or I want to get a cup of coffee while I do it, or I just actually don't want to be in my office. I want to be outside while I do that transition. So because we have a common language, I will explain to my kids, it's got nothing to do with you. It's not that I'm not excited to see you. It's just that mom's battery is really low right now, and I can't really be able to give you the love or attention or the focus or whatever the word is that I would use with them in that moment. So I'm going to go charge my battery, and I'm going to do that by sitting outside and reading my book or praying or just being in the sun for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to be with you, and then I can actually be with you and spend time with you. So it's not personal, it's not a rejection. And it really and because we do that, they are then also able to say to us sometimes they feel that their battery is really low today. They don't know why, but they think they need to rest, or they think they need to not do this activity. So they are more in touch as well with where their body is, so that we don't hit absolute like complete depletion where there's no spoons or battery left. And then you have when that happens is when you get the severe depression or aspects happening, because we've actually gone past our point of tolerance. And a lot of our kids with pain disorders, not because it's a secondary amplified pain, it's not what I'm referring to. Kids who have pain, they have very real pain. They do push past where is healthy for them because they don't want to miss out, because they need for themselves, they need to learn how to live or have a life and not be so focused on that. So again, when we do the energy account exercise, it helps for them to see what are the things that are big withdrawals. So let's maybe see if we can cut a little bit on those things and put some of the deposits in place. And also sometimes there are things that can be a deposit, but it's not necessarily their favorite thing to do, but it is a deposit. So sometimes things like going to the physio, it's a withdrawal in the sense of my emotional capacity doesn't really want to do that, but it is a deposit in my pain and in my physical mobility. And then that means I can do other things like go to sports because I've done the physio. So again, it's a very helpful tool in a lot of different areas for you as parents and for kids. And as I say as well, it's really helpful to know for yourself where your battery is, because if you are depleted, it's also very difficult for you to be engaged with your kids, or it's difficult for you to feel like you can do the day-to-day things that we need to do. And unfortunately, if you are completely overdrawn, it's really important to get help, whether that is from a medical doctor, from a therapist, or just making drastic changes however you can, getting help in from family. Because unfortunately, if we are constantly in overdraft, no one's body can tolerate that. It's unfortunately, eventually your bank's going to go, we've given you all the money, we've given you a loan with interest. There's nothing now. You have to start giving us deposits. Otherwise, you're cut off. And that's what happens when people end up in hospital sometimes in terms of a physical burnout. Then it's because there just isn't any resources left. And it's not to be kind of, I don't want people to get anxious about that, but I do want to explain why do I think this is such a big consideration that we need to have, is because unfortunately, as I said, and that's not just in the context of JA, and with JA, there's so many additional withdrawals that do come along with it, which is why it's so much more important that you do absolutely recognize where are those areas. And for myself as a parent, and also I'm definitely a bit of a type A personality there, it really meant letting go of a lot of stuff that I thought was important, that I actually just had to let go. It meant letting go of certain pressures. For me, I'm a Christian, and sometimes it means I would, in terms of my own kind of what I would really love, is I would love to go to church all the time, but sometimes going to church and taking my kids to Sunday school with other kids who are sneezing and coughing, and I'm so stressed out by that. I'm not really receiving in that. So I'd rather connect with our life group and attend church when we have capacity, when we know we're all okay, and when I know I have the resources to tolerate that discomfort of the kind of, all the things that comes with it. Because while church can be a massive faith deposit for me, there can be a very practical withdrawal, and also sometimes just going into a space where if we've gone through a flare, it's meant that we haven't been able to get there, and then we go back and everybody wants to talk about it, and that I might not have capacity for. So it was sometimes it's been letting go of things that I might have unnecessarily put pressure on myself, or saying to people, I'm so sorry. As a psychologist, I do get asked sometimes for advice or help, and I have to be really boundaried. And because my heart is often to help people, but if I am responding to every, I want to say, not casual request, but every request or informal outside of office hours request for help, it might mean an extra 2 hours of work a day. And it's a lot of those things, as much as what I love it, it does take from me. And I need to manage my energy account, and I need to recognize the impact it has on my family. So it's about having boundaries it's a massive part of it. And again, as I say, when we realize for us, what are our withdrawals, what are our deposits, that's when we can make that shift. Okay. So the other one that I wanted to discuss, I'm on 15% battery, but we're halfway through, so I should be fine to, I should make, my battery should last.
So while
Yes.
you're taking a pause over there, I wonder if it's not worthwhile pausing here and answering some questions. I've spoken to Kath from Arthritis
Absolutely.
Kids, and she's happy to stay on if your battery dies, and answer
Okay.
some questions as well. So
Perfect.
do whatever you want to do. If you want to complete
Yeah, that's
the
fine.
presentation or complete the talk now while you've got 15%, happy to do it. You just lead the way. But I know that there are no deposits in this case, there are only withdrawals. And when your battery is kaput, it's kaput.
That's
So
good.
it's up to
I
you.
think what I'm going to do, I will mention the toolbox because it ties in. I think, and I might be wrong, but some of the questions that I might get around it is possibly going to answer in the toolbox. So I want to quickly touch on that, and then we can. I'm not going to do everything in detail necessarily, but I just want to give the concept of that and how it links in with the energy account, and then we can see, because there's a lot of the obvious questions that people have often, and maybe no one has that, but often it is, how do I actually recharge my account? What do I do to recharge my account? And that's what the toolbox is. So I'm going to quickly touch on that, and then I will make time for the questions, and then if we see how we go from there. Okay. So the tools in our toolbox. When I talk about a toolbox, as I say, what I've just mentioned now is our tools are there for us to cope when something is stressful. So it's a direct coping tool when we are feeling, like I said last time, with if we are triggered with our trauma, or if we're feeling overwhelmed or anxious, you can actually use these tools practically. But at the same time, they are also something that we actually want to be doing consistently on a daily basis. It's also something we want our kids to be doing consistently on a daily basis. And that doesn't mean that we are necessarily spending an hour in each category of tools every day, but even 5 minutes in each tool a day can make such a difference to our energy accounts and to our overall coping and capacity. And what I often find, and I'm very guilty of this, is when things are going well, I use it a bit less. And I actually need to be using it more in those times to be storing up my energy and resources and things. So it should actually not be something that I do less in times that I have more capacity. It should be the opposite. But our toolbox tools, and that is things that we can do to recharge our energy account. They're not actually physical tools necessarily, but I refer to the concept of a toolbox. For some people, it helps. The analogy and the metaphor is really helpful. For some, they don't relate to it, so you use whatever works for you once again. And when I'm working with kids, I will sometimes take out an actual toolbox, like a plastic toolbox, and then I will explain each thing using a different tool from the toolbox. Because this is, there's no like, I won't say too young to start talking about this stuff. Some of the tools in very basic language, I've been explaining to my daughter Jocelyn since she was 2 years old. And it was hysterical because she would go, like, if she was frustrated, she would go, because we told her about deep breathing. She like completely overbreathed, but it was fantastic. Look, a lot of 2-year-olds wouldn't do that. She's also got her other quirks, and she doesn't do it consistently when she necessarily needs to. But it was something that you don't have to wait until kids are older. And the same is true. Teenagers might look at it and be like, that's so stupid. But that's okay. You can still tell them about it and like do it however it works with them. But it's not, there's no age limit to it. There's no too young or too old. I talk about these tools in my practice across the lifespan at various different ages. And as I say, I'm not going to, in each of these tools, I could do like a whole iChat on and go into it in detail and things. So I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is say again, as I say, think in mind maps. So picture it as heading is toolbox. Each of the tools is a separate heading, and underneath it is a whole variety of different things. So it's not supposed to be one thing. It's not one tool. It's categories that you use that help you in various areas to recharge and to maintain your capacity and your coping and your energy accounting. And irrespective of personality, interests, types, skills, strength, all of those things, all of these tools have value. And I can go into all the research around why these different tools are the ones we kind of refer or prioritize, because there is a lot of research around it. But it is, I almost want to say, take my word for it in this, or you're welcome to go Google it or use it as a starting point. But there's a lot of value, both in terms of just your emotional well-being, your physical well-being, your neurological well-being, your brain focus and functioning, and the chemicals that are within your brain. These tools change those things. And the trauma response we spoke about in the first session, that fight, flight, freeze response, a lot of these tools, what they do is they send a message to your brain that it is safe. So a lot of the times the value of doing them is in sending, because that response is an automatic response. It's not a logic response. So you can't logic yourself out of it, but you can do certain things to remind your body that it's safe now. So the first category as such is exercise, physical exercise. Ideally, it's a motor movement activity that increases the heart rate for ideally 10 minutes, but it can be short. And this is, again, if you are like me, where you are like a very, I'm an all or nothing person in some ways. So I kind of go, if I can't put on the gym clothes and do a full workout and have a shower and get dressed, then I don't end up doing it. But it's a lot more value to do a 5-minute walk or a 2-minute jump rope or a 1-minute jog on the spot than to do nothing, because there's still value in it. There is massive value in it. Even if you're in your work clothes and you jump rope or hula hoop or whatever, put a video on or YouTube on, something, anything that gives you that physical activity. And it's the same for our kids, is yes, sometimes the level of pain or the difficulty that they have would mean that this is really hard for them. But if we can find something, whether it is swimming, whether it is going on a balance bike, whether it is sitting on, we've got a like a trapeze swing thing for Phoebe because she does a lot of those things. So if her feet are struggling, she can use her arms to do that. And it's not about, again, we go where the capacity is, but if we do even 2 or 3 minutes of it, it actually does reprogram that trauma response that is, and it gives resources. Relaxation tools. So this would be the opposite, any activity that lowers the heart rate. So again, it can be a full half-hour guided meditation. It can also be a stretch. It can be a deep breath. It can be building a puzzle, reading a book, listening to calm music, being creative, anything that is bringing that overstimulation, almost that feeling of, oh, I have to be going, it's bringing that down. So it's relaxing the body system. And sometimes it's even doing something that you're not focusing on, like building a puzzle, can automatically then bring down the heart rate. And when the heart rate decreases, it starts to reduce the fight, flight, or freeze response in the brain. There's different ways that you can do breathing for yourself and for kids as well. Pretend to blow up a balloon, blow up bubbles, really blow up a balloon, put a tissue and blow the tissue. There's a reason why the brown paper bag is always used in a movie. It's a very helpful thing because it's a visual of how you're breathing in and breathing out. So again, if those are the things that help, it's fantastic to do it. Scrunch up a ball of paper and blow it off the table. So different things that gets, and often the focus that we also want is to get a big breath out, because then the in breath is more automatic, a deep one. So if we focus more, a lot of the time we get very preoccupied with breathing in, or how we should be breathing in. But if we focus on doing a big breath out, then the automatic in breath will also be bigger. Then it's especially for kids, it's a nice way to do deep breathing, a more practical way. Then we also have sensory tools. So we have got sensory systems. All of the sensory stuff is in the PowerPoint, and I'm going to make that available. What I want to mention on that is that our sensory system is how we take information in from the world. And when there is pain, then our sensory systems become influenced. So when we use the sensory system to calm us, to regulate ourselves, it can also help. It doesn't take away the pain, but it can also help with the pain aspect. Pain can also increase what we call sensory dysregulation, which means someone who doesn't have very high sensory response and need a lot more sensory input, when they're in pain, they might need even more. Someone who's very sensitive to sensory input, when they are in pain, it can become more extreme. So your sensory experience of the world is increased when there is pain. When you are sleep deprived, your sensory systems become dysregulated. When you are highly stressed, your sensory systems become dysregulated. So how we can then reverse or reduce some of that cycle is to regulate our sensory system, because it's not something we have to think about or manage our emotion or be logical about. It's just an activity that you do, which again sends the message to the brain and to the body to be more calm, and it recharges your energy account. So we can use our sensory systems and our kids' sensory systems in a very powerful way to actually improve coping and improve our capacity. And using different sensory systems can also be really helpful in times of high stress. So for example, with injections or blood draws, looking at what are the different aspects of the sensory systems that we can support for our kids to help them feel more calm in those moments. whether that is having a weighted body that they can be focused on so that the sensory input is there rather than on the injection site, or it's diffused, whether it is having something that they are chewing on because they need that, or something they are smelling. Or so for my kids, when they do blood draws, we give them earphones, we put a video on, and we tell the people at the blood test to just leave them alone, do the blood test, and pretend that you don't see them because they zone out. So we are using it's also technology, but we're using their visual and their auditory to be the focus rather than the tactile where the blood draw is happening. So the bigger focus or the bigger sensory input is there as well. So there's these kinds of tricks that you can do. Different types of tastes can also help when a child is feeling overwhelmed, so having certain tastes. For some it's sour, for some it's sweet. So a lot of it is exploring with your kids and your family, and again recognizing that you will have someone who is what we call sensory seeking, so they want more sensory input, and you'll have someone who's sensory sensitive, which means they want less sensory input, and they will marry each other and they will have kids who will be the two opposite profiles if you have more than one, because that is how it works. So again, sometimes when we're irritable, it's also because our sensory systems are actually just dysregulated, or our kids are irritable because their sensory system is dysregulated. So again, in our house, when we use that language to say, actually, this noise is too much for mom right now, her ears can't handle it, so that's why my voice sounds this way, or why my face looks this way, it helps to diffuse the situation a lot of the times. So there's, in the PowerPoint that I'll make the notes, there's a lot of starting points or ideas to start looking at ways to explore what is your sensory systems and what are some of the things you can do. And again, it's a language you can use in the family to help understand each other a bit more. And as I say, it's something that you can use to recharge your energy account. And it's also where you can check, is there a big withdrawal in some of your sensory systems? So a lot of noise or a lot of clutter might be a big withdrawal for some people who are sensory sensitive. So it's, again, something to be aware of. In the notes, you'll see I've also mentioned the interoceptive sensory system, which is basically the awareness of our internal bodily states. So our heart rates, our breathing, our digestive system, and also our emotions. Our emotions are sensory. So when we feel happy or sad or angry, there is things in our heart rate and our breathing that changes, and our temperature and our muscles, everything, which sends information to the brain. And that's a big aspect of how we then interpret how we feel. So again, in times when there's been a lot of trauma, we struggle to read our interoceptive cues because the message is not actually getting through because it's getting stopped by that trauma brain that's just stopping everything, nothing's getting in. But also when there's pain, it's often a lot of kids who have had pain have a lot of difficulty with their interoception. So you might see they have more difficulty knowing what emotion they're feeling or labeling their emotion. They might also have more difficulty knowing when they're hungry, when they're tired, because the interoceptive system is very preoccupied with processing the pain. So they struggle to process the other things in their body, and they might need help with that. Okay, so I've included quite a bit around that as well. There's also emotion tools, which is recognizing and labeling our emotions. Sounds really obvious. It's not always as much, because again, sometimes the emotion that's kind of taking center stage could be fear, and then it's really hard to experience our other emotions as well, or anger, or there can be a kind of dominant something that we feel, and then it's really hard for us to feel the other emotions. And often there's more than one emotion playing into it. And accurately recognizing what emotion we're feeling and where that emotion is coming from can again really help us to actually work through it. And most of us, I mentioned it last time in regards to grief, but most of us really struggle because of how society talks about things like anger, sadness, fear as negative emotions. We often downplay it or try to suppress it or try to get away from it. But actually, the healthy way is to recognize that all emotions are information, and we need that information. to know what's going on in our system or with us or within us. So emotions are actually information. We need to be able to recognize them, embrace them, and experience them to work through them. But if we keep trying to run away from them, suppress them, or ignore them, they are there, but they become overwhelming and bigger because they turn up the volume button so that you can hear them. So if they, so it is about, again, and it's the same with kids. There's a lot of, I've included in the PowerPoint different ways that you can really help them to build their vocabulary around emotions, which can also help them to talk about their emotions regarding arthritis and the diagnosis and their day to day. Because often they don't necessarily have the words to explain it, which then leads to them withdrawing or becoming irritable or frustrated. If you need to actually help them to develop the vocabulary to be able to share what it is that they're experiencing. Because I find I sometimes get frustrated. Why don't you tell me what's going on? But they don't actually have the vocabulary to do that. And that's true even for adolescents. We don't always realize the stuff we know as adults that we haven't actively taught kids. And we just kind of assume that they know. And this is not an emotional thing, but a stupid example is like, I was driving and we drove past an office building and Phoebe was like, what is that? It's like, no, it's an office building. People work there. They've got offices. And she's like, but where's the bathroom and things? I was like, well, or the kitchen. I was like, but no, but it's more like offices, not really a house. So they don't have all the different things and stuff. She's never seen an office building because neither my husband or myself work in an office building. Her grandparents don't work in it. She's had zero exposure to it. It's not in any books or movies we've watched. So she had no concept of this thing. But it's such an obvious thing that I'd never actually thought about, oh, she doesn't know that. So that can happen in our day-to-day lives and our day-to-day emotions. So recognizing it and working with it. Okay. And the last thing I'm mentioning, and then I'm going to give time for questions, is thinking tools. And the thinking tools is a hot topic for me, and I'm going to try very hard to summarize it as short as possible because they can be incredibly helpful. They can be really, really valuable. They can also be unhelpful, and I almost want to say at times harmful. Why I say that is because sometimes we over-ascribe thoughts or experiences or mood even to things that are real physical or physiological symptoms or concerns. And that's where it can become unhelpful or a problem. And I mean, an example is in terms of some of the studies that is being done now, where it's been something that I've looked at for a long time or been discussing for a long time, is that we do know that a lot of people with autoimmune conditions have got higher rates of depression and anxiety. And the model has often been that it is as a result of the difficulty coping with it or the impact on their lives. And it can very much be that. And in that context, and for those areas, a lot of the thinking tools, which is challenging your thoughts or being more positive or, not letting it rule your life or trying to see the bright side or, those, I'm over exaggerating them, but it's challenging your thoughts essentially or looking at solutions and not at problems and trying to find things that you still value. And all of those things are really, really important. But I worry sometimes that in us talking about that, it can sometimes happen that it can make the person or the child feel like if they're still not feeling better, they're not trying hard enough, or they're failing at therapy, or they're failing at their thought challenges, or they're not positive enough. And one of the things that is actually coming out in research now, and it's something that, as I say, I've seen it in practice with many clients, it's part of the actual inflammation and immune response is that the dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, melatonin, which helps you with sleep, is actually depleted because of the physical inflammation of arthritis. And it's very, very early, well, relatively early studies or relatively new research that's starting to come out now. But what that means essentially is that some of the symptoms of depression and anxiety that we see has got nothing to do with the coping or the impact or the lifestyle. It's got to do with just as much as what that joint pain is not about. They need to think about the pain being better and it's going to be better. There's a very real attack on their body happening, just as much there's a very real attack on the neurology happening. And as I said, that is something that I've seen it in practice where people have where we've logged it and looked at it and gone through it. There's a physical response and inflammation first, and then the assumption has been it's the impact of that that causes the emotionality, but actually there's a physiological reason for it. So when there is then physiological support and inflammation support, and sometimes it means psychiatric medication to help while we're trying to get the inflammation under control with the serotonin and dopamine and melatonin that is not there. And again, this is something that has to be discussed. The medication side has to be discussed with knowledgeable doctors in this field. But if that's not there, then sometimes the thought and the thinking tools can actually make the person feel like they are failing. And that's where I say I feel sometimes it can be harmful. It can be really helpful in a lot of other ways in challenging your thoughts. And, when we're getting stuck in that thing of it's never going to get better, then we want to challenge that thought because it will. When we are feeling very focused on just the problem or worried about the next flare, then absolutely challenging those thoughts or using a thinking tool can be really, really helpful and very, very important. But as I said, I just kind of give that disclaimer because it is an important one that we are seeing more of now. Okay. All right. And those are the different tools that I'm talking about tonight. There's one or two others that I mentioned in the PowerPoint, but you can just read on. Just using stories and things with kids can be really helpful, and using our own interest and finding things that give us joy and spark us joy is the other two tools. But I've still got 5% battery and 10 minutes of time, so I'm going to give that to questions now.
Okay. Juazel, I've been calling you Juazel. Juazel,
No, no worries.
this was so incredibly packed with information and so incredibly useful. Thank you very much. Uh, we've got limited time for questions, and our session normally goes until 9 o'clock. So
Yes.
if you do have a question, please would you put up your hand and go for it? You can unmute yourself. And just hop in. Any questions, anybody? Would anyone like to share their story? Oh, sorry, Kath has a question.
I have a question that isn't necessarily related. Zala, echo Laura's sentiments. This astonishingly valuable. Thank you very, very much. Really. I we're struggling with my daughter at the moment. She really is. She's completely run out of brain energy, and she's actually admitted at the moment for treatment of OCD and a couple related things. And we are exploring whether, the connections to her disease, because she's been flaring, her arthritis has been flaring for about a year. So there's no question that she's inflamed and she still has symptoms of that inflammation. So we know for a fact that she's still inflamed, and she has these simultaneous mental health challenges. And so it's a very interesting thing to explore. It's a very heartbreaking thing, but it's also interesting. And I'm learning a lot. I feel like I've been learning for a long time. But one of the things that's come up in Ella's therapy with her psychologist is an association that she made where she feels she has to earn good things. And a connection that she made with her therapist is that when she was little, there was so much stuff. There was medicine she had to take. There were blood draws. There were injections. There was physiotherapy. There was occupational therapy. There was aquatherapy. There was going to the doctor a million times. And often what we used to do when she was little is we would we would bribe her. We would say, if you go to the physiotherapist, then we can do some fun thing afterwards, and that will be your reward. And in her mind, she's made this connection that she doesn't deserve good things unless she's actually sacrificed something or she's done something bad. And that's coming up in therapy. But she was so little, and she had to do a series of really horrible things that no child is going to choose to do. And so I'm just wondering if it's a question on top of my head. It's not necessarily related to what you've spoken about, but I just wondered if you had any insight to that, because I know that's a very real thing for most of us, is we have to convince very young children to do things they don't want to do repeatedly over and over a long
Yes.
period of time. And if you had any insight into a more effective
Yes.
way so that they don't
No.
make that association.
So one of the biggest, I think, it's in so many areas of psychology as well, is we want to try as much as possible to move away from what we would call behavioral approaches in and of themselves, which is essentially that behavior response kind of approach. And in a lot of ways, that was the tool we had. And I mean, I know I've done that many times as well. But we want to try and move away from that to understanding and behavior support. So how would that look practically is instead of saying, if you do this, you get the reward, we would have the discussion to say, we want to validate that we know this is really hard for you. And you know what? It is unfair. It absolutely is. And this is where I go again, like the thinking tools are really helpful, but they first have to acknowledge where you're at. So we first want to actually feel, you know, how does it feel, and not just downplay it or kind of try. Because again, like I mean, I do this all the time. I want my kids to just be okay because it's really hard seeing them that way. So I want to downplay it for me. But for them, they actually need me to feel it with them and to say, you know what, it really sucks that you have to do this. There are some things that we can decide to skip or we can decide to reduce. And there's some things that we need to do. And it's not your fault, but it's because of the fact that you have arthritis. It's not fair that you do, but because of that, it means sometimes we need to do the physiotherapy. But what are ways that we can make it easier for you? What are things that we can do within that? What are choices within that, giving that sense of control? And then if we still want to do, and it's not bad having the reward afterwards, but we want to discuss with them that we would like, because that was tough for your body, we would like to give you something else to think about while you're doing it. So what is something fun we can look forward to while you're doing it? So how we frame it or discuss it with the kids, and again, depending on the age, we would do it different in that thing, but we want to frame it as much as possible, getting their buy-in into the reason why, and also giving them the reason why we're giving them the reward as such, is because the reason why we want to do that is because we want them to feel positive about the experience, and we want them to have something to look forward to. And we want, after you've had to do this really terrible thing, we want you to also be able to do really fun things, because it is hard for you. So a lot of the time, having those kinds of discussions and separating the behavior as such from the reward and more the reason behind it, and giving them that understanding, is what can help make the difference. And it's how we frame it, I almost want to say.
Thanks, Juazel. I can see that you're fading away quite
Yes.
rapidly. We just see the outside
Yes.
of your glasses.
I'm now, yes.
Interesting.
Everything is now disappearing.
What you said there is actually, it's difficult. I mean, I've done a lot of bribing and a lot of begging, not only with my
Yes.
JIA kid, but with my other kid as well, and what you're talking about there requires a lot of deposits from into myself. So I have to feel like I'm strong, like I have the bandwidth to actually have that conversation, because it's a very complex conversation to simplify for a young person, for my little young
Yes.
person I'm so invested in. So that would mean that I would have to put a lot of energy into myself
Time. Yes.
in order to be able to have
Absolutely.
those deposits, so
Yes.
I can share that or explain that to them.
Yes.
Anything else?
And I mean, what you say there is like, it's something I forgot to mention, but it's fundamental. I mean, we probably all.
Oh my goodness, is she gone? Oh no, she's there. Yes, are you there? Oh shucks. Okay, her camera's still there, but her voice is gone. I mean, her voice, well, her little square is there. Okay. Look, I think she's done incredibly well. I don't think she's going to come back. No, okay, okay. Okay, yeah, it was a brilliant session. Thanks everybody in the chat box. This was incredibly useful. We've got like a minute left of our session. Are there any questions or comments, anything you'd like to share before we close out and say goodbye? anything that somebody wants to share that you've learned? What have you learned tonight? What is the one big thing that stood out for you? Okay, I think we're all pretty depleted. Looks at things. Okay, so I'm going to close out. Thank you very much for being here. And it was, thank you for all the comments. It was really an incredible session, very resourceful. We learned a lot. And this has been recorded, so we'll put it up on YouTube and you can watch it again. And then we're doing a session in 2 weeks' time, which again with Juazel. So if you'd like to join that, please just let me know. Or is it okay if I send out meeting requests to everybody? If you'll just give me a thumbs up and I will do so, then I can just send out. Adelaide, yes, okay. Sashay, Devet, and Natalie, okay. Roxanne, thank you. And Michelle, okay, great. Thank you very much. And then the other thing that I wanted to ask you, it's 9 p.m. Is it the 12th of October, Kath, that's 12th or 18th? Is it 18th? I can't remember.
I thought it was the 12th, might be the 18th. I can't think right now. I think it's the 12th,
yeah,
12th of October.
Mid-October is World Arthritis Day. And what we normally do is have a picnic in various centers in Joburg and in Cape Town. And we try and do something fun. We try and print T-shirts at that time, and we go and visit clinics. And what I wanted to ask is that we're getting to October pretty fast. And if there's anybody in this group who would like to do some kind of volunteering around that, whether it's going to visit a clinic, whether it's helping with, I don't know, T-shirt printing or putting together a picnic, or contributing to the picnic somehow, with an activity for kids, whatever it is, some kind of support from a practical, logistical, admin point of view, please would you pop me a DM and let me know if you have a little bit of time and some energy on your hands. I know it's difficult with arthritis kids, but if you do, that would be fantastic. Okay, thank you so much and take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye.